Samburu Reserve, midday. A lion limps out from the open grasslands and collapses beneath a standing acacia. His body folds in slow motion, legs folding beneath him, chest heaving once, then again, before stilling. Dust rises around him. From a distance, it's easy to mistake him for part of the land itself, brown, motionless, spare. But one eye remains open, half shut under a swollen lid, tracking insects that hover near the wound. The skin along his ribs stretches taut. Each breath reveals more bone than flesh. His mane is patchy with burrs and dry soil, and the tip of his tail flicks once before going still. Vultures do not land, but a few circles at a distance. The air is silent, save for a dry wind that combs the golden grass in gentle waves. To rangers out on patrol are the first to see him. Moses, the elder of the two, raises his binoculars without a word. He's seen lions in decline before, usually at the edge of territorial battles or after injury. But not like this. This one is not old, not yet. The lion is in his prime, or should be. But his body speaks of hunger, of days without food, of something that turned quickly and left no time to recover. Moses lowers the binoculars and squints. Not long, he murmurs. The younger ranger, Kefa, doesn't answer. He just nods and records the coordinates on his notepad. No other lions are visible. No drag marks from prey. No scuffle prints in the dirt. Only the lion's slow entrance from the north, his tracks trailing back through dried mud and brittle stalks. A single, faint trail. No sign of pride. No females. No cubs. His isolation feels unnatural, chosen, or forced. The rangers approach slowly, but not too close. 30 meters away, they stop. The lion doesn't lift his head, but his ears twitch. He's not unconscious. He's watching, still inside his own body, still listening. Kefa unpacks a small water pan from their supplies and sets it down in the shade, closer than comfort might allow, then retreats with care. The water catches the light, still and silent. For nearly 10 minutes, nothing moves. Then, the lion shifts. Not fully, just enough to stretch a foreleg forward, claws slipping out slightly as he steadies himself. His tongue flicks once over cracked lips, and he looks at the pan. But he does not rise. The swelling on his eye is worse up close. A deep cut rides the edge of his brow, likely a claw mark, but not from prey. Another lion, perhaps two. If he fought for a mate or over territory, he lost, and the wound, untreated, has festered. It may have blinded him on one side. A radio call goes out to the vet station. It's not an emergency, not yet, but Moses relays the signs: dehydration, weight loss, open wound, abnormal behavior. Most lions do not collapse in the open unless they've already given up. If he tries to move again, Moses says, he might not get up. The sun burns overhead, but the acacia casts a short shadow, offering some reprieve. Time passes slowly. Kefa watches through binoculars as the lion's sides rise and fall, shallow but steady. A bee lands on the water's edge, sips, and leaves. The lion blinks. His body remains still at 2:15. A breeze picks up. The lion lifts his head a few inches, nostrils flaring. He doesn't look toward the rangers. Instead, his gaze drifts across the plain, searching the wind. His body sways, then drops again. The movement costs him something. The stakes are simple. If he moves too soon, he collapses. If he stays too long without water or help, he weakens further. If predators sense his state, scavengers may risk proximity. Even jackals can kill if the body no longer fights back. Moses watches for signs of infection, but the wound has crusted over. There's no fresh bleeding. That may be mercy. Still, The lion hasn't eaten. His stomach is sunken, his shoulder bones high and sharp. The fight took more than blood. Keffa notes another detail. One paw drags slightly to the side. Not a limp from exhaustion, a joint injury, likely in the front right leg. It changes things. If he cannot hunt again, survival becomes unlikely. But for now, he breathes, and he does not flee that they leave another shallow dish near the first. This one with soaked clothes. Easier to reach, less movement required. Then they retreat to the vehicle and wait. Their presence is no longer needed up close. Only patience. The lion rests. No one touches him. No one speaks. Hours pass that at sunset. The wind turns cooler. Dust settles on his mane, and the last light curls around his body, thin and long. His breath continues, slow, steady, light, and when the sun disappears, only the shape of him remains, cradled in shadow, a living silhouette, motionless, but still there. The sun dipped low across somber reserve, casting a dull bronze over the land. The wind had faded, heat lingered, but without movement. The air pressed still and thick around the body of the lion. He had not shifted since midday. One paw remained stretched forward, claws half visible. The other was folded beneath him, pressed awkwardly to his chest. From a distance, it was impossible to tell whether he still breathed, until a small flick in his ear betrayed the truth. Moses stayed seated on the bonnet of the vehicle. 30 meters out, the lion was visible between the thorny shrubs, tucked under the same patch of shade that had barely moved since earlier. Keffa stood nearby with the field scope. Neither man spoke. There was nothing to say that hadn't been thought of already. The lion's wound was drawing insects now, not just the hovering swarms, but those that landed and stayed. Flies clung to the wet crust of dried blood near his eye, legs twitching in tiny jerks. A few crawled into the fur along his ribs, undisturbed. He didn't snap at them, didn't growl. The occasional twitch, a subtle muscle jump along the spine, was the only answer. Moses wiped sweat from his brow and took the second shallow pan. This time, he wrapped cloth around the rim to reduce glare, then poured in clean water. He glanced at the lion, then slowly crouched and walked out across the soil. His boots pressed into dry tracks made earlier. Nothing new marked the dirt, no signs of movement from the lion, no turning of the body. Even the tail had stilled that. He set the pan down 5 steps closer than the last. No sudden movements. He didn't look at the lion directly, just placed the water, adjusted the angle, then backed away. The whole action took less than 30 seconds. The lion didn't lift his head. Back at the vehicle, Keffa said quietly, "I don't think he slept." Moses nodded. "He's listening, though." The silence returned, the kind of stillness that accumulates in heat, not the cool silence of night, but the thick, breath-holding kind that makes birds wait and insects pause. No distant roars, no call from the pride. Nothing had come looking for him. From this distance, they could see more of the damage. His face, though mostly intact, held a tension around the mouth, a tight pull at the edge of the jawline, like he was holding back some reaction. His hind legs had more muscle than his front, which now sagged slightly at the joints. His breathing, though present, was shallow, less than 10 breaths per minute. Normal would be closer to 15. And still, the flies did not leave. One landed on his nose, another on the swollen edge of his closed eye. He blinked, but only once. Moses marked it down in his notebook. Minimal reaction. Stillness could be strength, or surrender. They debated radioing for sedation, but it wasn't time yet. The lion had not tried to run, nor had he shown distress. Intervention before he moved could trigger panic, and panic could kill faster than infection. What they needed was one small sign, not dramatic, not sudden, just one signal that he hadn't given up. It came as the sun began to skim the edge of the trees, letting long shadows across the dry flats. A low cry went up from a pair of hornbills nearby, and as their calls echoed once and faded, the lion lifted his head. Not all the way, just enough that the dust shifted under his chin and his mane brushed dry leaves. His eyes opened, one clearer than the other. He looked not at the men, nor at the water, but toward the tree line to the west. A long, slow glance, held for several seconds. Then he looked down at the water pan. A single twitch ran along his front paw. His body did not follow Dot. It was not an attempt to rise, not a crawl or shift, but it was awareness, a visible decision to look, not random, not instinct. Moses breathed in quietly, then noted the time. "He knows where it is," he said, still tracking. That means something. They would not push further. Twilight deepened. The land changed color, yellows and browns softening into gray. The last of the heat began to lift from the soil, and still the lion lay there, eyes now half shut again, but not sleeping. The flies remained, but he no longer flinched. What was at risk remained the same. If he refused water, his body would fold further inward. If the infection spread, it would reach the bloodstream. If he attempted to move too early, his front leg could collapse under him. Any shift, any mistake, would carry weight, but for now, he had not tried to leave. He had not turned from the presence of humans, and he had opened his eyes when it mattered that by full dark, the rangers made camp in the vehicle. They kept one lantern dimmed and pointed away. No more movement came from the lion, but just before midnight, in the quiet between winds, Moses looked out and saw that the water pan was no longer full. Dawn touched the edges of Samburu Reserve with a faint blue before the sun broke over the hills. The air was cooler, quiet enough to catch the far-off rustle of guinea fowl and the slow creak of trees, settling after the night. No vehicles moved, no hooves pounded dry earth, only a long, thin silence resting heavy across the plain. Moses stepped out of the vehicle barefoot, boots in hand to quiet his movement. The lion still lay beneath the same acacia, body curled slightly now, as if sleep had arrived and passed through without stain. The water pan beside him was nearly empty, the soaked cloth nearby, pushed slightly from its place. No drag marks, no shift of ground beneath his flank, only small indentations in the dust where one foreleg had turned outward. Each step Moses took left a clear imprint in the soft soil. He stopped a few meters from the edge of the shade. The lion's sides lifted in slow rhythm, not full, but steady, more certain than the night before. The wound along the lion's face had begun to crust and split again, but now, with clearer morning light, Moses saw another injury, deep and raw, running along the right flank. It sat just behind the ribs, not bleeding but still open, as if a claw had caught and torn rather than pierced. The edges looked dry, brittle, with signs of dust pressed into the skin. It wasn't fresh, but it wasn't healing either. Left untreated, it would fester, too deep for flies to clean, too dry for it to close on its own. He crouched low, hands at his knees, watching. The lion's tail twitched once. A good sign. It meant awareness. It meant nerves still reached the limb. Then he spoke, voice low and even, not directed at the lion but offered into the morning air. Still here. The lion's eyes opened, both this time, one clearer than the other, but both focused. He didn't raise his head, didn't bare teeth or shift away. He simply looked at the man kneeling in the dirt. He did not flinch. Moses remained still. And that look was the kind of communication that couldn't be chased or earned. The lion had chosen not to flee. In his weakened state, any attempt to run would have led to collapse, or worse. drawn scavengers from the brush. But he hadn't tried. He hadn't roared, warned, or growled. He had allowed the nearness. That, too, meant something. There were no other lions in range. No scent trails nearby. No paw prints larger or smaller. No scuff marks from play or mating struggle. He was alone and had been for some time. That, more than the wound, unsettled Moses. Adult males didn't stay alone long unless pushed. And when pushed, they usually died. He stood again slowly and backed up to the vehicle. Kefa was already mixing another claw soak. No need to say anything. The lion had given them the permission they needed. Not for sedation, not yet, but for presence. Kefa passed the soaked cloth into a pan and placed both gently near the tree's edge. This time, the lion watched with both eyes. His chest rose. He shifted his front paw under his body, tucking it closer. A sign of reserve strength, faint, but there. When the men returned to the vehicle, they reviewed the nose. Breathing rate, 12 per minute. Slight improvement. Clarity, moderate. Still inflamed on the left. Wound observation, fang laceration for to 6 inches long. Possible infection. Moses folded the page back and looked out at the tree again. If he drank once, he said, he'll do it again. The stakes had changed slightly. The lion was now stable enough to wait. But the wound would not wait long. A day, maybe 2, before the rot inside overtook whatever fight remained. If he rose on his own, it had to be soon. If not, they would step and dot. The morning grew warmer. Insects returned to the air, slower in the cool but persistent. A few drifted back to the lion's wound. He swatted once with a paw, not at the flies, but at the movement in the grass behind him. A reflex, a pulse of instinct. Then, as the sun lifted, he shifted his weight. A full movement this time, chest lifting, back legs stretching slightly, spine curving just enough to pull himself more beneath the tree. Dust kicked up around his haunches. He let out a short grunt, low and hoarse, more breath than sound, and then he rested again. Head down, paws crossed, eyes closed. But not in defeat, not in pain, in stillness. I'm waiting. The moment passed without words across the plain. A herd of impala moved along the distant ridge, their soft steps making no sound at all. By late morning, the vet team arrived over the southern ridge. The trucks, quiet engines, cautious approach. The rangers met them at the outer clearing, away from the lion's view. Nothing had changed visibly since dawn. The lion remained beneath the same acacia, chest low to the ground, eyes often closed, but not asleep. His tail no longer twitched. Flies came and went in slow spirals. Dr. Kamal stepped out first. He was quiet, long-sleeved despite the heat, and he carried no dart gun yet. They wouldn't sedate without purpose. They couldn't afford to. Sedation was a calculation. Weight, hydration, stress, injury depth, and most of those factors remained unclear. Too early, and the lion's heart might not hold. Too late, and the wound would fester beyond repair. From a distance of 25 meters, they observed. The lion lifted his head as the first door clicked shut. He didn't move the rest of his body. His ears turned toward the sound, then stilled again. When Kamal stepped into view, crossing between the shrubs, the lion opened his eyes fully. It wasn't aggression. His mouth remained closed. No teeth, no vocalization, just a silent calculation of a predator who no longer intended to act like one. Kamal raised one hand slowly, not a wave, not a greeting, just a signal of stillness. Then he crouched and watched. A few minutes passed. Dust swirled low near the lion's belly. The shade under the acacia had shifted slightly, thinning at the edges. Sweat rolled slowly down Kamal's temple. No one spoke. Then the lion moved, not a leap or roll, but a shift from the belly outward. His right forepaw stretched forward, claws half extended. Then his back leg followed, scraping against the ground, pushing small tufts of dry grass aside. It was slow, uneven, and deliberate. He dragged himself 3 feet forward, toward the edge of the tree's shade dot, and then he stopped. The vet team froze. Keffa knelt beside the kit, unmoving. Moses narrowed his eyes, watching the strain in the lion's ribs, the soft pull of muscle that nearly gave out mid-shift. But he didn't collapse. The lion raised his head higher now, shoulders lifted, weight resting on one foreleg. His body quivered slightly with the effort. He looked straight at the group, not wild-eyed, not desperate, calm, aware, present. He's watching. Kamo murmured that not as prey, not as a threat, not as anything familiar, that just watching, that it was a strange kind of permission. Kamo slowly lowered his body into a full crouch, never breaking eye contact. The lion's ears flicked once, but his gaze didn't shift. His chest rose faster now, not panic, but exertion. The short drag had cost him. The wound along his flank opened slightly with the movement. A thin streak of red pressed out, to dry to bleed freely, but enough to warn. It wasn't clean. Infection had begun. Still, the lion didn't hide. He didn't shift away. He didn't attempt to retreat beneath the fuller shade. He stayed half in sun, half in shadow, breathing, observing, allowing. Kamo stood again and stepped back. He turned to the others. Not yet, he said. If he pulled himself once, he might do it again. They debated placing food nearby. A piece of fresh meat might entice movement, but it also risked flies, risked scavengers. It risked shifting the lion's focus to hunger when the body was not ready for digestion. Instead, they replaced the water and laid a clean cloth soaked with antiseptic nearby. If he rubbed against it by chance, it might help. That was all they could offer for now. The team set up camp 30 meters out. No tents, just shade nets and water stores. The vet kit remained closed. Darts weren't prepared. Moses marked down the time of movement. Kamo adjusted the sedation chart, but left the dosage blank. All of it came down to one decision, not theirs, but his. By early evening, clouds gathered along the far edge of the reserve. Heat shimmered lower across the flats. The lion had not moved again, but his posture remained lifted, head up, ears attentive, eyes closed only for short intervals. Every so often, he looked toward the camp, not with fear, not with longing, simply to watch. The stakes were clear. If his strength returned, there would be another attempt to rise. If not, his body would begin to shut down. Sedation would then become the only option, but it would carry risk. With the infection spreading, time narrowed. Still, for that night, no action was taken. No dart, no hands, no rope. They stayed. He stayed. The acacia darkened under the dimming sky, and the lion remained at its edge, lit faintly by the last light. Neither hidden nor exposed, just there. Watching back, dusk fell gently across Samburu, not with drama but with stillness. The sky held a fading pink behind the western hills, while the ground cooled in stages, one layer of dust at a time. The flies thinned as the heat drained from the air. Crickets began their rhythms, and under the acacia, the lion remained, unmoving but upright now, resting with his front legs crossed and his chin pressed loosely against them. His breathing was steady, his eyes open and closed in intervals. The vet team had not approached again. Their camp remained just beyond the shrubs, barely visible through the brush. A lantern hung low, turned inward, casting soft light across a notepad and a flask of tea. Kamo sat beside Moses, not speaking. There was nothing new to note. The lion had not moved since his short drag forward earlier in the day, but he had stayed alert, a good sign. Then, Just after full dark had arrived, it came, a roar, long and low, rolled in from the south. Not aggressive, not claiming. A contact call, singular, distant, asking. The lion lifted his head. His ears turned, his shoulders stiffened. His eyes, which had been half closed, opened fully. He did not respond with sound, but he listened. And then, slowly, he pushed his front paws beneath him, not to rise, but to anchor. His whole body leaned toward the sound. Moses sat forward slightly. "He knows that call," he said, voice low. Kamo didn't answer. He already knew. 10 minutes passed. The air thickened with quiet again. No second roar came. No movement in the bush. The lion lowered his head back down, still facing south. Then movement. Not from the lion, but from the far edge of the scrubland, where the tree line thinned into open flats. A shape emerged slowly, stepping one paw at a time over the cracked earth, smaller, lighter. The same golden brown, but thinner, ribs visible beneath a young, narrow chest, a lioness. She paused at the clearing's edge, scanning the open ground with ears forward and body low. She did not move like a hunter. There was no crouch in her steps. Her gaze wasn't on prey. It searched for something else. The ranger said nothing. No lights moved. No sound stirred from camp. The lion under the acacia had not looked up again. But something in his posture had changed. His chest rose fuller now. His tail curled slightly at the tip. His ears shifted between forward and side facing, listening not just for threat, but for meaning. The lioness stepped further into the open. Her movements were slow, deliberate. She moved without rush, as if fearing that speed might undo the moment. As she drew closer, the distance between her and the lion collapsed into quiet tension. Still, she didn't run. She didn't call. She stopped 10 meters from the tree. The lion raised his head again. Their eyes met. No sound, no shift. Just a long, level look across open space. She didn't back away. Instead, she walked forward again, this time more directly, her steps heavier now. She reached the edge of the shade and paused only once, long enough to breathe. Then, without hesitation, she lay down. Her body touched him along the length of one flank, a careful, wordless act of closeness, not dominant, not possessive. "Just contact me." Her ribs lifted against his. Her shoulder rested near his paw. She didn't make a sound. Her tail curled round her own legs. Her eyes closed. The male lion didn't move for several seconds. Then, his chest lifted in a long breath, and he leaned, almost imperceptibly, toward her. Moses lowered his eyes. She was looking for him, he said. Kamo nodded once, slowly, and he waited. There had been no other lions, no scent trails, no sign of pride nearby. But she had come, from the south, at night, with nothing leading her except whatever thread still existed between them. Something not visible, but alive enough to pull her across miles. The stakes had changed again. The lion was no longer alone, with another beside him. Even weak, he was now part of something larger. A lioness would not rest beside a dying male unless she believed there was still life in him. She had not come to say goodbye. She had come to stay. They would watch closely. If she brought food, it could change everything. If she remained, she might guard him against scavengers, or she might simply be the reason he chose not to give up. Either way, the ground beneath the acacia tree had shifted. The night carried a different silence now, one that held weight, not emptiness. The two lions lay together without sound, and somewhere beyond the trees, the wind passed through the grass like water. Unnoticed, the first light of morning slipped in slowly across Samburu, drawing long lines through the grass and touching the base of the acacia with a pale golden edge. Dew had gathered in the folds of old leaves and along the cloth left near the water pan. A soft rustle carried through the brush, but the lions did not stir. They were still there, lying flank to flank, their bodies nearly indistinguishable in the low light. The lioness had not left in the night. Her breath moved steadily, ribs rising in calm, even rhythm. The male, though thinner and more still, remained pressed to her side, his paw resting just behind hers. The vet team had taken shifts through the dark, keeping lanterns low and voices lower. Nothing had moved beyond the lions. No scavengers had approached. Even the jackals, often bold before sunrise, had stayed far from the tree's shadow. Just after dawn, Kamo stepped out alone, a fresh pan of water in hand. He paused halfway between the tree and the camp, waiting. Neither lion moved, but as he reached the worn clearing, the lioness opened her eyes. She didn't rise or flinch. She simply watched him with quiet stillness, her ears angled slightly forward. Kamo knelt, placed the water pan near the others, then stood and backed away without turning his back. His hands remained open at his sides. The lioness blinked slowly, and then the male stirred Dot first. A subtle twitch of his hind leg, then a deeper shift as he pulled his forelimbs beneath his chest. The movement took effort. His muscles were not ready for weight, but his instinct carried him forward. He pushed once, paused, then again. The lioness did not rise. She watched Dot. By the time the sun reached the top of the brush, he had reached the pan. His tongue moved slowly at first, barely catching the water's surface, then more steadily, short, deliberate laps, eyes half-lidded from exertion. The lioness joined him seconds later, her shoulder brushing his as she leaned down. The contact remained unbroken. They drank without sound. Moses noted it from camp. He's hydrating again. Real drinking, not reflex. Kefa stood beside him. She kept him calm. That's what changed it. Kamo didn't speak. He was watching the way the male rested his head gently against the lioness's neck after drinking. The way she turned slightly into him without pulling away. It was not displayed, not dominance, just presence. Steady, warm, and chosen, they settled again beneath the acacia, this time closer to the tree's center where the shade had gathered thickest. The lion's breathing was still labored, and his wounds remained unclean. But he was no longer drifting, no longer unmoving. The line between surviving and recovering had been crossed, not in full, but just enough to mark change. The vet team held a quiet meeting behind the shrubs. Kamo laid out the options: sedation for wound cleaning, possible antibiotics, gentle capture. But none of it outweighed the risks. Not now. Intervention might undo the trust already built. The lion had chosen water. He had not chosen to retreat. And the lioness, thin as she was, remained with him through it. There was a risk in waiting. Infection did not pause for sentiment. But sometimes, stillness had more healing than medicine. So they made their decision. They would not dart. Not today. They would leave new water, place antiseptic cloths again near the feeding area, and return only to observe. Distance, now, was the best help they could offer. They packed slowly. No engines yet, no rush. One by one, they folded nets, stored charts, and erased the fire circle in the soil. Kamo carried the final pan out to the base of the tree and placed it silently. As he stepped back, the lioness lifted her head to follow his movement, but didn't rise. The male remained still, his body now partially in the sun. The ranger stood one last time before turning to leave. What brought her back? Kefa asked. Moses shook his head. Doesn't matter. She came. They didn't look again. By late morning, the trucks had vanished into the bush, their tracks already dusted over by wind. The lions lay quietly in the shade, side by side, unmoving except for the occasional twitch of a paw or the flick of an ear. The tree offered only narrow shelter now, but they had chosen it not for cover, not for strategy, but for something else. A place to rest, a place to wait. The sun warmed the grass. Wind moved through it gently, pressing patterns into the open ground. And beneath the tree, pressed together in quiet shape, the lions did not speak, did not move. They simply stayed.